So there I was, watching the pinnacle of late 90s horror. It was Scream. Because horror has become my all-consuming obsession, and I was scrolling through Twitter because nothing makes you need an escape from humanity like Twitter, when I saw an interesting tweet from The Ghoulish Show, which is actually an amazing podcast and just general resource about horror movies, stories, horror tropes. If you need more of that whole thing in your life, go check it out. But looking at this tweet, I started thinking to myself, what is elevated horror? Are we talking horror movies that make you think like they look like people? Are we talking big budget horror movies that get the large mainstream scale pool like It Chapter 1 or Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? I spent a long time mulling over this idea before deciding to myself that I was taking horror too seriously. I needed to just sit back and enjoy some killings. So instead of any of those good movies we're talking about, today we're going to watch the early 90s movie Dr. Giggles. It would be easy to blame, people like Freddy Krueger and the Wishmaster, the whole Nightmare on Elm Street series for the rise of what I like to call jokey slashers. The killers filled with one-liners and puns about the violence and gruesome acts that they're about to bring upon these innocent teenagers. Even silent killers like Jason and Michael began to go out of their way for more silly and over-the-top killings, or victims that were more focused on being personalities and cracking wise because, the killer couldn't do it themselves. I think it was just a time when people were beginning to find themselves more interested in the killers who were in every movie instead of the victims who were mostly just there to be fodder for those, over-the-top kills. So people tried to make fun and entertaining killers instead of worthwhile victim. And that's where Dr. Giggles comes from. He's a hyper-intelligent psychopath who thinks that he's a practicing doctor and constantly kills his patients with his tools, along with amazing one-liners almost every single time he does. Which is why I'm going to break one of my rules and actually include movie audio in this recap, because I cannot do this movie justice without his one-liners. We open with the titular doctor performing surgery on a man in a suit, and for a moment it genuinely seems like this might just be the start of his insanity, until we join asylum staff walking down the hall talking about how he escaped. The good doctor begins his escape by attacking the nurse and revealing that he's released the patients from their cells in order to distract the staff. In just the first 5 minutes, we have been introduced to our killer, told what we need to know about him, and he's delivered 4 one-liners. I wish I could say that we're going to stay on this roller coaster, but unfortunately, it's time to meet our would-be victims. The first are Jen and Max, who are the main couple, and we're kind of tangentially introduced to the rest of our kill list, before joining Jen in a real doctor's office where we learn that she may have a serious heart issue. After what is just frankly too much background information, we finally join our poor soon-to-be dead teens breaking into the good doctor's home. As one couple is locked in a room as part of a prank or something, it's not very clear, our doctor is looking fly as hell and finally ready to make some house calls. His first bit of medicine is a strong shot of poison to the guy, who's apparently named Trotter, and his girlfriend.
I'm not really seeing patients yet, but I guess I can make an exception.
We catch up with the rest of our coffin fodder at a place called Breeder's Hill that gets broken up by a few police officers, who are then called in by a nosy neighbor who immediately gets her sinuses checked.
Now, up wide and say ah. No ah.
We're then subjected to even more world building. The long and short of it is that the good doctor is the long-lost son of a local doctor who went insane trying to find a replacement heart for his wife. And Jen's mom died during a routine surgery, which makes her afraid of them. This is unfortunately also the era where creators thought that the victims had to be fleshed out. I mean, I'm as tired of the whole cookie-cutter stereotype as everyone else, but man does he get in the way of the killings. And when you're sitting on a charismatic gold mine like Dr. Giggles, every minute with him not in this film becomes a fucking chore. We come back to 2 teens about to play doctor themselves, which actually leads to a kind of funny moment with a broken condom. But the doctor catches a hold of the girl first and checks her temperature.
Leave it in for at least a minute.
Then pretty quickly catches the guy in bed and makes sure that he's not having kids anytime soon. If you're wondering why I'm not using any of their names, I genuinely don't know them. I've seen this movie 3 times and I only occasionally catch their names because they don't say them very often or really spend time with any of these characters besides Jen and Max, who I really, really wish they'd spend less time with. Especially since they just keep hammering in the exact same character beats. I get it. Her mom's dead. She's sick. Move on.
Terminal.
So this lady that Jen's dad is dating has the audacity to be a total bitch by mirroring my exact previous statements. But she's in the movie, and that makes her a bad person. Well, I'm a recapper on the internet, so I'm okay for being heartless. Doesn't matter anyway, since she gets the lipo treatment from hell pretty quickly.
Oh, I know. It sucks.
So, this chick gives a weird blowjob to a saxophone before Max decides to cheat on his dying girlfriend, and Giggles finds out that Jen has heart problems, triggering his own little flashback. Jen does eventually catch Max cheating on her, because it turns out that all of her friends are garbage people. I guess this scene in this mirror house actually does a really good job, because the cinematography of it makes me wish that I gave a shit about the teenagers that are about to die, but I just don't. I also don't really know what happened to this bitchy girl. It looks kind of like she was beat to death, but Jesus, look at the size of that band-aid. Is that the greatest? Anyway, Jen ends up fleeing the House of Mirrors and is eventually rescued by the police. The police also have a fucking exposition dump because everyone in this town seems to be sitting on a deep, dark secret. I'd skip it entirely if it didn't have the fucking coolest escape scene that I've seen in a long time. Just look at this. Damn, that's dope. We do eventually get back to the story proper, and the doctor attacks Jen's dad. If while dropping jokes like their bodies.
If you think that's bad, wait till you get my bill.
Because they've poured so much time into exposition though, they also have to kill the old cop, who actually nails a solid shot into the doctor. Honestly, at this point, watching the doctor perform surgery on himself like a fucking hero, I was genuinely confused to how there's 30 minutes of film left when there's only 2 people left to kill other than Jen. Dr. Giggles gets into a sick hospital fight with Dr. Chamberlain. Just as a quick aside, I do have a love for killers who get progressively more and more hurt as the movie goes on. Giggles wins this fight and puts an end to Chamberlain with a simple exam before kidnapping Jen.
If I were you, I'd get a second opinion.
Dr. Giggles has Jen in his own personal surgery room, and it's here that we learn that there's a no nudity clause in her contract. The young officer goes to the old house to rescue Jen, where he finds all of the people he's killed throughout the night, and learns that he's been taking their hearts, which we see he's intending to use to replace Jen's. He begins to stop Jen's heart in order to replace it when the cop breaks in, and Giggles begins to make good on his escape before going on the offensive.
Have a heart.
Max channels his inner Randy Orton and appears from out of fucking nowhere just in time to take a driver to the chest, and Jen fires a gun with her eyes closed, distracting the officer long enough for him to get just completely wrecked. While trying to make good on their escape, Jen and Max fall down the stairs and Max is winded while the doctor and the officer fight it out in a blazing office. Jen and Max eventually do make their way out of the office right before it explodes with Dr. Giggles inside. Jen finally makes it to a hospital to undergo her heart valve transplant, but the procedure is interrupted by the good doctor, who is burned to fuck but determined to see his work through to the end. Jen, half delirious from the anesthetic, stumbles away and locks herself in a supply closet, where she uses a defibrillator and some bottles of water to finally put an end to the evil Dr. Giggles. Or so it seemed. He rises up again, but is quickly put down by Jen when she delivers her own sick one-liner.
I hope feel well.
Take 2 and call me in the morning.
Giggles isn't about to be upstaged by Piper from fucking Charmed though, so with his last breath he delivers the final joke and seems to finally pass away.
There a doctor in the house?
We then find out that Jen's dad is alive, but nobody cared about that, and Max uses this whole murderous doctor scenario to gloss over his previous infidelity. We end with a confirmation from her heart monitor that she is indeed turned on as hell for some reason. I know that I gave this movie a lot of crap for its exposition dumping and poor characters, which I do stand by, but it's not that much worse than a lot of movies from this era. The problem comes from the fact that Dr. Giggles was so much fun to watch, and I wanted more of his jokes. I wanted so much more of his jokes that every scene that he wasn't in just made me want to see him more. It doesn't help that Max has the charisma of a stoned teenager and does absolutely nothing redeemable at any point, or that Jen is almost just as boring. And in scenes where she's supposed to have emotion, she just sounds bored and almost like she didn't even want to be part of the film. It doesn't help that she's going to be the final girl, so you know that you're going to have to deal with her for this entire film. I'm going to do a quick plug for something that I only recently found, and they don't know that I'm doing this, so it doesn't really matter. But The Ghoulish Show actually recently had an episode about the final girl problem, which unfortunately doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. At the end of the day, Dr. Giggles is a fun movie if you just want some, B-tier schlock. You probably want to take a drink or 5 and maybe light up a bit before watching it, and definitely make sure you're with friends who want to laugh. But other than that, it's a great time. With that, as always, whether you like, comment, subscribe or not, you're still a friend to me.
I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife.
Good night.
We got place to go, things to do, people to see, and we gotta get it done right away.